The complacent part of the business is really what causes a lot of agents to fail, even successful agents that enjoy success. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, so your ability to transition through market changes is what's going to differentiate basically the winners from the losers, the men from the boys, the whatever.
You found the Real Estate Law Podcast, because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. If you're a real estate professional or looking to build real estate expertise, then welcome to the conversation and discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Law Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, we are here with attorney, broker, Rory Gill from Next Home Titletown Real Estate and Urban Village Legal in Boston. And we have another podcaster and an amazing guest that we have right here. I mean, I shouldn't just say you're a podcaster, Casey, because you've done transactions that are totaling over $500 million, which we can't even say that we've done that. So, thrilled to have you on the podcast. This is Casey Brown. He is the CEO of 3000 Capital. And he is also the podcaster that you need to listen to the podcast. And we're going to get you synced up afterward as to how to get a hold of his podcast. But CashFlow Pro, if you have not checked this thing out, it is full of amazing information. And Casey is a really cool host. He makes it very easy to get his guests to open up to him. And we're hoping to hear the same thing from Casey today. So Casey, welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you all for having me.
Yes. Well, we should thank you for actually appearing on the podcast. I mean, you have an amazing reach and you've done all these great deals. And I really have to apologize for the backgrounds that you're staring at with Rory and myself. This is legitimately the world's most boring podcast backgrounds that we're presenting to you today, especially versus yours, which I just have to admire. I love the shiplap.
Hey, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to make up for the visual imperfections with content. We're going to get people will not worry about the backgrounds once you show them how they can make money with their money.
All right. Hey, I love that. And Rory, you and I are going to have to just do a better job with these backgrounds. And we'll explain all that another point. But we just happen to be kind of moving around a little bit these days. And that's why you're staring at blank walls, right?
All good.
We have the podcast on the road at the moment, but we'll settle back into a new routine.
Yeah. So Casey, you were born in Western Kentucky and then you found your way out to Pueblo, Colorado, which we've actually had a number of guests on this podcast from Colorado lately. And a number of episodes ago, we were talking to some land purchasers, Brent Bowers and Habercost, who was actually in, where was he? West Pueblo, I think was the town that he was in.
I've talked to one of those two, I think, on my podcast. They do some land acquisition, some lots and some things. And it's called Pueblo West. So yeah.
Yep. Pueblo West was the same guy that did Lake Havasu is what Dan was telling us. Really cool infill lot development. He's down in Florida now, but he's really hustling and it was a great guest. Brent and Dan were both great guests and interesting they found their way to your podcast as well. Maybe we're all finding the same great stories out there. But now are you back in Kentucky now?
I am in Kentucky now. I moved back here. I left Colorado in 2000 when I graduated high school. Grandmother was still living at the time. She lived on the family farm here in Western Kentucky. We're just about an hour northwest of Nashville, Tennessee. I know I'm throwing states there, but we're actually just across the state line. But my grandmother was here. I really wanted to come back to the family farm just because it was such a rooted thing in my childhood and my life that I wanted to spend some time there after I graduated to kind of get some bearings on what I wanted to do with my life. So that's really the main reason, because everybody's like, why'd you leave Colorado? Colorado's so pretty and this and that. And I was just like, hey, just personal reasons. It wasn't anything against anybody there. I love my mother. I love my stepfather. I love my stepbrother. I love all of them. But I had to come back and make my way back to her to see what life was about.
Yeah. Everyone's got their own reasons as to why they move around. People go to Colorado and they find themselves, they see the mountains and they say, I'm never leaving this place because they come from somewhere flat and somewhere a little bit, a little bit poorer. And some people have family reasons. They want to go back home. And I mean, can you show everyone that the Kentucky, the bourbon barrel thing that you showed over that? I love that thing. We got to get that on camera because we're also big bourbon drinkers. And yes, we're very jealous that you are in bourbon country in Kentucky.
Yes. If you get a chance, we would love for you to come up here and we'll go on the bourbon trail and go to the distilleries. And one of the lessons of my life was actually, taught to me through bourbon, and the fact that, when you really think about bourbon and you line them all up, they all have their own taste. They all have their own intricate flavors. They all have their own differences, right? But the main thing that when you do these bourbon trail things that people focus on is the stories that come out of the distillery. Like for instance, if you just go back and look years ago how NASCAR was born, and then you start telling the story of NASCAR, and those guys were running moonshine and running whatever other types of spirits they were running up through those hills. I mean, just the stories that come out of that stuff is really what becomes, and then the bourbon is kind of the bridge, the connection between us and those rebel type activities or whatever, So but yes, I would love for you all to come up here, and we'll definitely go do that if you can make your way up, because I'm a big bourbon lover as well.
Rory, I think we're going to take Casey up on that. We certainly had a couple bourbon stories last Thursday night, didn't we?
We sure did. It brings people together.
It is funny how the bottles of rosé actually turned into the bottle of bourbon as the evening went on.
Yes. I had those nights too.
Let's unpack a lot of your story here. I mean, you've been doing this since 2007. You've done over 400 real estate transactions, totaling close to $500 million.
Yep. So basically, if everybody will remember back 06, 07, early 07, like the market was just, I mean, it was rocket fuel. You just, like I always liken this on my podcast. People say, well, there was never going to be another bad day, right? And then all of a sudden we woke up, I'll never forget, I was exercising at the YMCA here in town, and I remember seeing it on the screen. GMC goes bankrupt, or, this was all about the same time. There's just this massive financial crash, like everything just blew up. And and what was so intriguing about that is that the government supposedly had set all of these standards through the FDIC, and had set all of these lending standards and everything that they've been working on basically since the Great Depression. And basically everybody was sitting there going, well, all that stuff was supposed to work. What's going on here? And again, we got into a position where the country got into a position where a lot of people get themselves into an over leverage. We were borrowed out to the max. We were, we didn't have our ceilings and all were kind of just maxed, and we just didn't have anywhere to go but a crash. So instead of just easing things back down, of course, we all know what we did. So when I started my career, that was the beginning, right? So 07, I sold one or two houses, and I was like, man, this is all right. I can stand these little $8,000 or $10,000 a month trend, deals. I was like, man, this is going to work, right? Then all of a sudden, boom, blew up. One thing I realized through the blow up is that my phone was also blowing up, because now all of a sudden people, like, basically you could send a parrot out to the front yard and he could sell your house for you at one point. And then after that, everybody was like, oh, we need somebody that has marketing knowledge, that has an understanding of the real estate market, that can get this thing out there beyond where I can get it out there. Right. And so that really was the beginning of my bulk of my story and my rise in my local market, I guess, if you will. And so with that, I realized that, you just had to get an audience. Okay. And so that's what led me to basically a career of just blowing through real estate transactions, and people would call me even if they didn't like me, because I'm in a local community where people either like you or they hate you. There's really not a lot of people that don't know you when you're in this type of space where you're advertising all the time and you're getting an attention. There's not a lot of people that really don't know you. Everybody has kind of heard of you or something like that. And so even people that hated me, and pastors of churches that had real estate agents, like 4 or 5 real estate agents that go to the church, were calling me. And I've never spent a day at their church. I've never put $1 in their offering plate. And so that was simply because a lot of agents had gotten complacent in the fact that they were just kind of churning their clients. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start snatching these clients that really don't have an agent. Right. And so that's what led to the beginning of my career, was just getting myself out there and doing nothing more than getting myself out there and having an honest transaction. And again, it's tough in a small town because, for lack of a better term, you kind of piss about half the people off in the very beginning, because if they're not using you, they know of you, or they know your grandmother, they know your aunt, they know your uncle, whatever, and they expect like special treatment or something like that. And when you don't give it to them because you're protecting your client's interest, people get upset. So it's very, very challenging. Nothing more or less challenging than bigger markets. There's just different challenges, right? So, yeah.
I mean, you're bringing up something I think that's really important to note right now. I mean, we're not in 2008. We can go into the details of why things are very different from 2008, but we are, a big market transition, just to kind of keep it open-minded, where agents who have become complacent when the market was relatively easy, at least on the listing side, have to now do a little bit more work and, show their professionalism. Do you have any advice for those agents who maybe have come of age in this industry when complacency was the norm, or it was just easy and, a lot of bad habits could be fostered?
Well, you have to reflect, and you have to constantly reflect. And reflection is done through various other things outside of your daily norm. Like one of the biggest, things for now, I want to make sure that we differentiate here. We're talking about the agency side of things. We'll get into the investment side later on. I want to bring anybody that's a real estate agent or anybody that potentially have this, I want to kind of bring them behind so they understand, because my goal at the end of the day is to find investors, but my goal is also to educate people in the real estate space, because honestly, a lot of real estate agents don't know about real estate investing. So just to put that out there in the beginning, so people kind of know where we're going. The complacent part of the business is really what causes a lot of agents to fail, even successful agents that enjoy success. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, so your ability to transition through market changes is what's going to differentiate basically the winners from the losers, the men from the boys, the whatever, right? And so my tip would be to always be listening. Just listen. When people talk, just listen. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to what their needs are. Listen to what their wants are. And then figure out a way to meet that need or that want. And again, as this market transitions, people are going to realize, hey, man, 2 weeks ago, I could have sold my house on my own, right? I could have put a sign out there. There'd been 50 offers in 24 hours. Now you have to start adjusting to the idea. How to talk with some clients the other day. They were like, well, can't we just have an open house and we'll just collect offers after that and we'll just sell it? And I said, because then we don't have to fool with packing our dogs up and we don't have to fool with showings all the time and this and the other. I said, listen, I want you to understand that while that may work right now, we're in a transition period where the market is shifting and we may not have that luxury right now. We may not have that luxury of picking out the best of 15 offers, right? Mm-hmm. We could potentially only have one. And I said, I want to make sure that you understand that we don't set your expectations up here and we only meet here, because I want you to know that there's now, again, I let them know that I'm transitioning. I'm in this transition market along with them, right? I'm unaware of what could potentially be the result on the other side of this. Hey, we're putting your house on the market now. And to be quite honest, we missed it by about a month. Truthfully, if all things are equal, we missed it by about a month. So now I'm transitioning with you, and I want you to know how it used to be versus how it was, and know that it might fall somewhere in the middle. So the complacency part can be met by just simply keeping an open mind, listening to your clients. Don't be so stubborn and don't let your clients be stubborn because they think they know. And if they are, let them know, but just tell them, say, hey, just so you know, if that doesn't work, this could be the alternative.
I want to pivot that a little similar topic over to the investor side of it.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a wealth of experience in different markets and different segments of the market, different investment strategies. And I'm not going to just come right out and ask, what's the future? What's the best, asset class for the next couple of years? Yeah. But, how do you stay agile in your thinking in the investment space? Because I can see somebody thinking, there was a formula that worked great in 2010. You could buy distressed properties, you could buy, hold, and if you did that strategy for a number of years, you'd be doing great. That same strategy may not work today. So how do you break out of your habits, even the good ones that served you well in the past, and just be a more agile investor?
The worst thing, let's even go a level above that. And let's look at it from a life perspective, right? Basically, your formulas, like you said, the perfect formula in 2010 was to do this, this, and this. The perfect formula in 2020 to 2022 was to do this, this, and this, right? Basically, everything in between, all the time in between those two perfect formulas was spent trying to figure out what the perfect formula was as we all move, as the market moves, and as you chase to try to get these things to line up, then they do, right? So the investment strategies are always changing. And with that being said, maybe another 6 to 8 years before things just perfectly line up where we really see a direct shoot up north move of, say, multifamily, right? We're going to spend the next 8 to 10 years chasing why is multifamily not lining up like it did in 2020, 2021, 2022, right? So with that being said, you have to, again, the complacent part, you have to be out looking for different ways to invest. And when you can get the syndication world has done and the syndication world, notice I don't say this real estate syndication, but the syndication world and some of these funds that have kind of been bred out of this world, out of this segment of the market, have made it where individuals and people who typically wouldn't have an investment opportunity at a direct to consumer type of an investment are now getting an opportunity. And I say that, for instance, I'm going to say the car wash market. Okay. I've got some friends of mine. That's where I've been the last couple of days, was at a conference with a bunch of friends of mine, and we were all talking, and the company has a car wash fund, right? Now, how many other times in this world have you had the potential opportunity to go invest directly in car wash, where, hey, that guy puts the quarters in, those quarters are filtered through a couple of different people, and then I get the return, right? Most of the times when you start looking at that, you are either the car wash owner or you're the car wash user. You're not necessarily both, or the car wash owner was a fund, right? So I say all of this to bring us back to some of these higher cash flow markets, and thinking outside of the box is going to be the best return. Another example, I have another friend of mine who's in Southern California. He runs an ATM fund, right? And this ATM fund may not be for everybody. It's high cash flow, very little appreciation. Well, actually no appreciation, because the machines obviously depreciate in value, but you're buying in to the cash flow, right? And so looking at these alternative investment types, and a lot of people just don't understand that stuff. They don't understand that, what is your goal? And much like building a business, you have to have you have to set a goal and you have to focus on it. You can't take your eye off of it. And if your goal is appreciation, then hey, real estate is your deal, right? And a lot of people are like, well, real estate is so high right now. Everything's so high. Why should I invest in real estate? Well, I'm going to tell you. I say this all the time on my podcast. I'm going to give both of you an example, right? Let's go back to 2006. Okay. Just like I said, there's never going to be another bad day. The days are, oh my God, we're all sleeping so well. Everybody's happy. Everything's just flowing perfect. 2007 comes. It's, we're starting to feel a little top heavy. Then 2008, right? And the market, boom, just becomes completely bipolar overnight. Then everybody's walking around scratching their head, wondering how they're going to put meat and potatoes on the table. Okay. Now, fast forward a little bit. Now, we've been through that, right? There's never going to be another bad day. 06, 07, everybody's like, I don't know whether I should buy. I don't know whether I should buy. I don't know whether I should buy because it's so high. It's so high. It's so high. Fast forward now, or fast forward to 2019 or 2020. Tell me right now, either one of you, a single piece of property that you would not take right now, almost virtually sight unseen, if somebody called and said, hey, I'll sell it to you for what its value was in 06. Yeah. The highest the market ever was.
Maybe swampland in Arizona. I don't know, but
that's what I'm saying. That's the only like assets that were never worth anything to begin with are still not worth anything. But I'm going to tell you, show me any piece of property that somebody says, I'll sell it to you for exactly what it appraised for in 06. You're going to snap it up. The highest the market ever was, right? We're here right now, 2022, highest the market ever was. Are you going to be regretful in 2032 that you didn't invest in 2022? I mean, look at the trend. And I don't tell people to look at the 10-day trend, the 1-year trend, the 6-month trend. Look at the 10-year trend. Things are done in 10 years. The cycles come in real estate basically in, I'd say every 10 years, but it's average of 10 years.
Don't you think that a lot of the people you could be sitting on the side with cash waiting, which is great. If you have the cash to wait and say, I'm going to make a good investment in a couple months, find the right deal, I'll wait on that. But I find a lot of people that are waiting are the ones that can't get in, and they're hoping that things go down. And that's their way of justifying why they're waiting. And then they're going to look back in a couple of years and say, whoa, I should have bought in.
6 months, they've lost 15% of their cash.
Yeah.
Their cash can buy 15% less today than it could 6 months ago. So what is that going to be in a year and a half? Probably not going to be quite as dramatic or drastic. But I've got a friend right now looking for a house. Man, that's so high. That's just too high. Man, I can't give that for that house. That's too high. Okay, that's fine. Somebody else will.
Yep.
And you're going to keep looking. That's no problem. And the problem with that mentality, again, is either get in or don't. There's no focus there. There's a focus on, well, what if the market regresses? Okay, 06, market was high as it's ever been. And somebody's standing there saying, well, what if the market goes backwards? Well, here we are, 16 years later. What are you going to do? You know, sit on it. If you're buying something that you're not going to have to sell, then what's the issue? You know, it's going to cycle back up.
I mean, as an investor, as a homeowner, you probably shouldn't be purchasing real estate if your time horizon is 6 months.
That's exactly right. Because, and that's what I tell, I have this talk so many times. We're really close to Fort Campbell military installation right here. And I have this talk with young soldiers all the time. We're going to be here we're definitely going to be here for 4 years. So we want to buy. All right, my man, let's sit down here and let's look at a few things. Let's talk about this. 4 years. You're basically completely exposed to the market if you have a 4-year timeline. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to pay out, because if somebody bought in 18 and this 20, or somebody bought in 17 and then sold in 21, obviously this whole scenario right here is not going to fit that bill. And it's tough to get people to understand that coming out of that cycle. Hey, listen, that was an outlier. That was a market that, yes, it comes around. It'll come back around, but you're probably looking at a 12 to 14 year turn on something like that. So what do? They buy anyway, right? And then the market's down. They come to sell. They have a payoff. They haven't paid their funding fee back. Their payoff is about what they paid for the house, and now it's worth 15, 20% less. Well, I told you so. And again, it's our business to sell people real estate, but it's also our business and our fiduciary duty to educate. And the education part of that is what I take so diligently, and having people come in and saying, hey guys, make sure that you understand that this is what's going to happen, or this could happen. Now, again, sometimes you're proved wrong. But
that's also the 3,000 capital side of it, because, that's basically what you're looking to do is find individual investors, and you're raising money from them for, I'm guessing, mostly commercial real estate opportunities that you have. Yeah.
Time. It's all about, if you are going to need that $100,000 or anticipate that you possibly could need that $100,000 in the next 3 years, then our investments are not, we're not for you. And I don't mean that we don't want you. I don't mean that we don't want to talk and see if there's some other connection we have with somebody else who might be able to help. But as far as coming into a 5-year real estate fund, that's not the move for you. If you've got $10 million in the bank and you want to invest 100,000 of it into here, and it's really not going to make any difference whether you get it back in 5 years or 10 years, or you just get the return, then yes, that's not saying that our investors have $10 million in the bank. I'm just saying that a lot of times you have to think a lot further than tomorrow, next month, next year. You have to be thinking, hey, I would rather have this cash flow. Maybe if you have $100,000, it's suitable for you to go buy a smaller single family rental house and have the cash flow yourself, something that then you could unload that house if you needed to.
Before we talk about, I want to talk about the podcast also in a second. Sure. I do want to ask some questions about 3,000 Capital, because I think people that listen to podcasts like mine, like ours, like yours, they are trying to say, can I invest in this? Like, do I have the funds to do it? Do I have the time frame to do it? Am I the type of person that a fund like 3,000 Capital is looking for? Could you maybe chat a little bit about, like, not your ideal investor, but the types of investors that might be ready for an investment with a fund like 3,000 Capital? So
the first part of this is we're specifically set up for accredited investors. Okay. We are running under a 506C, which means we can advertise everywhere, anywhere, everywhere. We can put a billboard up in downtown Las Vegas if we want to, whatever we want to do. If you're a non-accredited investor, I have some friends that run 506Bs as well, but they have to have a previous relationship with you in order to take your money if you're non-accredited. So the first thing being said is we are for accredited investor funds, which an accredited investor, I suggest you Google it. It basically means pretty much means if you give us $50,000 to go buy real estate with you and we lost every dime of it, like you would all of a sudden be living under a bridge in a box because we lost your 50 grand, which is not going to happen either way. But I'm just saying it's for a little bit more of an affluent investor. Okay. So with that being said, our investors are pretty familiar with real estate investments. They're familiar with the cash flow that comes from them. They're also familiar with the time, the terms that come along with the investment as far as that's concerned. And as far as the business structures as well, like we set it up an LLC, and then basically in the limited partnership world, it's called a GP and an LP. LLC world, it's called member and managing member. Same difference. So again, typically we like people that have some at least reasonable idea of business in general. A lot of doctors who are very process-oriented folks and engineers who are very process-oriented people really have a fairly easy time grasping these concepts. Not that those are, again, not that we don't want somebody else who's in a different field investing. I'm just saying that process-driven folks typically have a very easier to get some of these ideas across to, and they're like, "Oh, hey, yeah, cool." And they're, here's 50,000. They get their $200 or $300 a month return. Then, of course, return to capital after a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody's going to invest $50K, you'd use that number. Maybe the expectation that you set up over that 5-year period is basically $200 or $300 a month of drawing, and then you get your capital back at the very end, or something.
Correct. Now, so specifically 3,000 capital is set up. Now I'm going to kind of maybe dive in just a hair under the comfort zone here, just so that I can get some of these ideas across. So we are what's called a fund of funds. Okay. And what that means is we specialize in the investor relations business. Okay. We specialize in the idea that an investor brings us money. We turn around and invest it in other folks' funds, right? And I'm going to get to all of the questions. I know they're bouncing there. Well, why do you do what? I know that's going, but I'm getting there. Okay, so that's the first thing a lot of people run into is why. So we manage investors, and I don't know. So it's much like, I know people think, well, I just give you money. Why do you need to manage me? Well, there you go. That's why, because you have questions, right? So we're in the investment management space, basically. So I have an agreement with some operators that I have personally vetted, that I have personally put through my process that says, hey, these guys have been in the business for a long time. They've had multiple full cycle asset closes. They're brilliant in their space. They're focused in their space. They're focused in the space that they know better than anybody else. Okay. And that being said, our fund actually, so with each operator being focused in their space, it allows us to diversify our investors' funds across asset classes, across geography, and across operators. Otherwise, they take $100,000 and go to a single operator. Now they're invested in a single operator, in a single asset, in a single location. And you see where that goes. So all of that being said, our fund of funds, so I've gone to these operators after I put them through a laundry list of vetting process. Now I've got 3 operators that I specifically raise capital for. Now I went to the operator and I said, listen, if you don't have to take care of the investor relations side of things, you just have to take care of one investor, okay, which is 3,000 capital. What kind of preferential treatment can you give me if I can bring you a lump sum of capital for your deal, right? Now, in keeping it simple, or the other option to that is if an operator has a Class A and a Class B share, right? So Class A share, the operator says, hey, you bring me $1 million or you invest $1 million, you get this return. You get this back end split. We have these terms. You get to come to my Malibu beach house and party with me, right? Whatever. That's a Class A share, right? And it's $1 million minimum investment. You got a Class B share that's a $50,000 minimum investment, right? And the Class B share gets a lower return, lower split, doesn't get to go to the party, doesn't get to do blah, 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 right? So now what we do is if you got $1 million and you got 50,000, what we do is we go get 20 investors that all have a minimum of 50,000. They don't have the million yet, but they have 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 to invest. We bundle those folks' money up and we send it to the operator and buy in at Class A preferential treatment. And then, of course, we get 3,000 capital gets a shaving of the return in the middle. But if the difference is an 8% return versus an 8% preferred return versus a 10% preferred return, and we just keep say, hey, 0.5%, the investor is getting 9.5% back. And again, these are just examples. The investor is getting 9.5% back versus 8%. Hey, it makes perfect sense for everybody. It's win, 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 because the operator doesn't have to manage the relationships. The investor gets a higher return. We get to live, and we get to keep everybody happy.
And you're going to Malibu.
That's right. The Malibu Beach House party. I have yet to have an operator offer me that, by the way, but you never know.
If they're out there, if you're listening, but
hopefully they're listening and they're gonna do it now.
Yeah. Casey, that was an extraordinary explanation as to how this works. And, I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast and other real estate podcasts like yours and the other great ones that are out there probably scratch their heads and saying, how is this all functioning? How do people have this money to do it? How do I get involved? And I think you just explained it right there.
Because so many people with that 50,000 investment, they hear this concept, and initially from a high level, they hear this concept and they're like, I'll just take my 50,000 and go straight to them. Why do I need a middleman? And the unfortunate part for 3,000 Capital myself is we come off as that middleman, which I guess to a certain degree we are. But the thing is that investor could take that $50,000 and you've got one of, I'm going to just say 20,000 potential operators that you could invest it in. How do you know that guy is not going to take that your 50,000 and go buy that Malibu beach house, right? So we've been through all of those people and said, hey, this is the cream that's rose to the top as far as operators go. This is the safest place for your money. Again, the guy that wants to make a quick turn and wants to be in a high-risk asset with a high-risk location or whatever, we're not for you. We have some one-off syndication opportunities every once in a while, but that's not where we're at. We're for the person that wants diversification and wants some security, some safety, but yet still make an 8% preferred return on their money, plus the split.
Right. Again, a great explanation of all of that and how the system works with syndicated real estate investments and how you're a fund of funds managing others, and you act as that voice and pool the money, and it's worth taking a little cut of that because that's the service that you provide. That's the value add. It's just like we were talking about land investment earlier, and some of the guests we've had on the same podcast as yours. They're adding value by, they're getting wells dug on their land. They're getting them zoned correctly, absolutely. Right? They're worth a lot more money. It's not just a piece of land that has trees on it.
And while this syndication business, these podcasts and stuff can make us as syndicators feel like, have the listeners and so on feel like we're all buddies, we're all friends. The thing is that a lot of times when you pick up the phone to call one of these operators, they've got a pretty distanced path between them and you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's talk about the podcast, because CashFlow Pro is another excellent real estate podcast. You're doing it daily is what you told us earlier. I don't know how you do that. It's a lot. This is a lot. Like, we put ours out weekly, and I really appreciate your being on it and all of our guests. And we also work with producers just like you do, but it's a commitment, right? I mean, you guys committed to this thing. How many episodes deep are you?
Well, right now we started out slow, but now we're like our 65th or 70th day in a row deep in our daily podcast part. Wow. So we just went daily not too long ago because we were kind of hesitant. And I was hesitant about the commitment, but I thought, no, let's do it. Let's go. Let's get our voice out there. Let's be heard. Let's start to try to make a difference. One of the things, which you've got 3 basically middle-aged white men sitting here. One of my passions, I shouldn't say ours, some people agree, some people don't agree, but one of my passions is I've got 2 of my 5 kids are my daughters. And one of my passions is making business more receptive to women, giving them the opportunity to build a business as well. So we do have some causes. We do have some things that we're after as well.
Yes, that's very near and dear to our hearts as well with our daughter. And I think there's a lot of education that comes from podcasts like CashFlow Pro and ours that you don't learn in school. Like even in high school and college, we talked to a lot of young investors and they came out with 4-year degrees and then they find the real estate podcasting world and they are off to the races, because of stories like the ones that you and your guests tell and stories like this one that their professors didn't tell them because either they didn't know or it wasn't part of the curriculum. But
Right.
These are the real life stories that allow people to get wealthy relatively quickly.
And I'll tell you, financial literacy, if I had a second cause, financial literacy, and we were at a conference this past weekend where Shaquille O'Neal spoke, and actually my son got a chance to meet him and so on. And he says, he basically preaches about financial literacy. And it's one of those deals where you have to educate. These kids are being educated on concepts that the teachers understand and things that they feel like they need to be taught, but they're not being taught how to balance a damn checkbook.
Yeah. I saw that photo on your Instagram also with Shaq and your son on stage, right?
Yeah. Shaq awesome. Actually interviewed my son, did a couple interview questions with my son. It was unbelievable, really.
Did he do you proud? Did he do you proud as
absolutely,
as your son?
Man.
Yeah.
He got up there and smiled and talked just like he was sitting on the couch at the house. And I was very, very tickled. And Shaq does so many things for so many people and so much stuff that a lot of people just don't even realize.
A lot of those folks, a lot of the athletes, like they've done great with, funding schools, whether they're here in the United States or outside the US, because they believe in those causes. Eventually you have so much money that what are you going to do? You have to give back. At least the good ones do. Really quickly about the podcast, if there's one thing that you wanted to tell people to tune in, which we will put the link in the show notes and make sure that everyone could find their way, and we'll, make sure that we're sharing your episodes. What's one thing that people can get if they're going to go over and subscribe to CashFlow Pro?
You're going to get an education, okay? You're going to get an education, and not only are you going to get an education, you're going to get an education from, remember those people at the cream at the top I told you? Mm-hmm. You're going to get an education from them, and that's what matters. And when you go to CashFlow Pro, it's www.cashflow.pro. You're going to see all of these folks on here. I mean, much like Rory and Jason here. I mean, you're going to meet the people who are in the business, who know what they're talking about and know what they're doing.
Yeah. I don't know about you as a host, but I'm always astounded at the amount of people who want to they open up on podcasts like this. Yep. They'll open their financial ledger. I don't think it's people bragging. I think it's people that, because again, I've said this many times, this is not a zero-sum game. Like, I don't have to lose for you to win. Yep. Like, everybody could win.
Everybody wins. That's what I said about our situation. It's win, 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 win. It's not, that's the small mentality. Is that just because you're letting somebody else win means you're losing. And these people are doing that while spending endless amounts of time on social media apps, like just scrolling. They're like, I'm not giving that guy a profit. I'm not doing, while giving your information and your time and everything else away.
Yeah. Well, it's a good service you're doing, especially daily. My God. But, all the power to you if you have the time for it. That's amazing.
We're definitely trying. It is. It's encumbering, but we do 4 episodes Tuesday, 4 episodes Thursday, because every once in a while, like last week, I had to reschedule all my Thursdays. We're rolling, man. It's great. We love it. Love meeting people, love talking to people, love hearing stories, and getting basically down into the trenches with them and seeing what they're doing. So.
Yeah. And if you're still listening to this podcast, now you have two people you can call if you want to appear on both ours and on Casey's, because we'll if you got a good story, we'll take you. So
that's right. We'll see, because we all got to grow, right?
Yeah. Rory, do you want to get into the final 3 questions? I know, Casey, we actually didn't prep you with these, so we're going to throw them your way. We ask the same questions of every guest, and they're really easy. So, just you could give us answers off the top.
That's good. Come on.
All right. So here's your pop quiz. If you had to give a presentation for 30 minutes on something with absolutely no preparation, what would the topic be?
Absolutely no preparation would be real estate marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I could give a presentation on real estate marketing and tell you how to gather your local audience, how to get involved in your community, how to lead with value so that those people could follow you. Now, that's the business side, the life side, how to be successful in merging business and family together. That could all go together.
Those are 2 good answers to the surprise question. So
that second question is an amazing question. That's why a lot of people are doing now. They're learning from podcasts. They're trying to figure out how to build financial wealth and stability and independence so they can be better people for their families. Really? Yep. That's the other part of that sentence. So that's great.
No, I think when you're doing more unconventional work, that's not just collecting a paycheck and a W-2. You're doing it for a reason. You're doing it because you see the bigger picture. Otherwise, I have no other explanation as to why you'd leave W-2 paying work and take on these risks.
That's right.
The other question we have for you is, what's something that happened early on in your life that affects the way you live and do business today?
Failure. Man, I used to get so caught up in failure. Like, I would cast my line out in the pond. I wouldn't get any fish, right? And I just kept thinking, man, and it kept coming back in my head. All right, well, if you're not out there fishing, you're definitely not going to catch fish. If you're not reeling in and recasting, you're not going to catch fish. And when I started implementing that into my daily life of business, hey, if you're not up and you're not out there and you're not at least doing something, you're definitely not going to get anywhere.
Yes, life's lessons from a boat, in a lake, on a river, in an ocean.
There you go.
Love it.
I mean, to beat the analogy, you could spend, all your time, perfecting and tweaking the fishing pole, and then just casting it out, losing all the time, just getting out there and just giving it a try.
Yep.
All right. And finally, just what's something that you're watching, listening to, or reading these days?
Man, I'll be real honest. So Bill O'Reilly just got done with another a book in his Killing series. And that's probably more from an enjoyment perspective than a business perspective, but I love to read. And so I just recently read that book, and I just feel like that kind of stuff, it exercises your mind. It may not be the greatest book or story, but just reading exercises your mind, and it gets you in these ideas of how all of this stuff fits together in this world.
We can't all just read business books.
That's right. If you do, you'll just burn yourself out. So,
Casey, we really appreciate this time you spent with us today. We're going to link everything up in the show notes here. So CashFlow Pro is the podcast that I encourage everyone to go listen to right now after you hit pause on this episode. And then 3000 Capital, we'll also link that up in the show notes. 3000capital.com is the fund of funds.
Yep.
But if people want to reach out to you, Casey, let's send them over to the podcast, right?
Yep. www.cashflow.pro. No .coms, no nothing, just .pro.
All right.
Cashflow.pro.
You'll get a couple links out of this podcast recording, and then we'll have that appear in our podcast roll as well. So it'll be more and more links, and we'll send them back to your site. So Casey, thank you so much for being on the Real Estate Law Podcast. This has been a super interesting conversation. I really appreciate your going in depth as to how 3000 Capital works. I think that was just a fundamentally excellent discussion that people are going to want to rewind and share with others. And just great insights. I mean, you've been in the biz for a long time, and you're a fellow podcaster. So, we're really grateful that you spent some time with us today.
Awesome.
Rory, where can people find you?
You can come find me at my brokerage, Next Home Titletown, nexthometitletown.com, or my law practice, Urban Village Legal, urbanvillagelegal.com.
And you could reach out to me if you need to, Jason at nexthometitletown.com. You can give us some tips as to how we could decorate this background so it looks more like Casey's, because, we are a clean slate here. And if you'd like to review us or give us a comment, we read all the comments. We love reviews. We hope they're 5 stars. And we really appreciate your listening to the episode. So on behalf of Casey and Rory, thank you so much for listening to the Real Estate Law Podcast. We will see you next time.
You found the Real Estate Law Podcast. Because real estate is more than just pretty pictures, and law goes well beyond the paperwork and courtroom arguments. If you're a real estate professional or looking to build real estate expertise, then welcome to the conversation and discover more at realestatelawpodcast.com.